So, good afternoon to everyone and welcome to our guest. We have today Carolina Matteo Cecilia, who is a urban specialist working at European Commission, DG DevCo, in the unit dealing with cities, local authorities, digitalization and infrastructure. And Beatriz Alvarez, which is also working DG DevCo in the unit dealing with governance, democracy, human rights and gender. So we have two perspectives today, and we will discuss how a city for women could be and showcase also ways in which cities, donors, multilateral organizations, such also the EU, can prioritize and promote women's participation. So the title of today is Building Cities for Women, but this goes beyond also the built environment, and we will focus also on the social, economic, and political aspects. And Cities Alliance, by being a global partnership working on cities and with also a wide range of members, we offer the platform to do so. So this webinar is also part of our global program on gender equality in cities. So my name is Giulia Maci, and I'm the coordinator of the program. Let me start by explaining a bit why we decided to focus on this theme today and also in our work. So, the first thing is that women participations in cities is a global priority. And this is true in terms of security and safety in cities. Even today, many women in the world don't feel safe, welcome, and comfortable in the public space. And statistics are quite alarming. 83% of Egyptian women have been harassed on Cairo street, and a rape is reported every 29 minutes in New Delhi. And only 12% of women in Lima feel safe in the city, according to UN. So often also women's experience of violence in cities are not even reported, or if they are reported, are not even recorded. And this is an interesting campaign that happens in Lebanon in 2017 to abolish the law that was basically establishing that if the raper would marry the victim, the crime was not persecuted, basically. So they abolished this law in 2017, and still, and in many countries until now, rapes are not persecuted for many reasons. And in terms of also service in cities, the data are quite telling and alarming. In fact, if we consider that only 27% of the world population have access to toilets, and around 1 billion people in the world need to defecate outside in open spaces, this creates also major issues for women that have to go in isolated and remote areas, and this makes them even more vulnerable to rape and abuse. And in terms of also water provision, are again the women that normally they have to go to collect water, and this it requires a lot of time, multiple trips a day, and this also draw them away from other activities like education. So if 780 million of people cannot read, 2/3 of these people are women. So we're talking about education, we're talking about services. And then in terms of economy as well, there are implications, gender implication in that. In fact, in terms of land ownership, in 77% of the country in the world, equality in terms of land ownership is by law, but not in practice. So in Nigeria, for instance, like more than 90% of land is owned by men. And also in the informal sector, we know that more women are employed in informal sector, so in more precarious and marginalized work. So it's also an issue to integrate women in more productive and good quality jobs. The second motivation why we are here today, so one is because it's a priority, and the second is because cities have a key role to play. Why? Because we all know that by 2030, more than 60% of the world population will be living in city. We will be all urban. And if we want to get it right, also in terms of SDGs and equality, and if we want to build more inclusive cities, we need to address gender disparity right now. We have to start now. And so we need to collect better data in terms of women inclusion in cities, gender-specific economic health data, and also on how women experience city life, no? So in terms of needs and issues, and at the same time raise awareness globally and act at the city level, looking simultaneously at different aspects of city development. So this is a framework that was published in our brochure recently for gender mainstreaming in cities. And we can see that cities also offer the opportunity to tackle the question of women equality from a multi-sectorial and holistic perspective, no? So we identify few interventions and changes that need to happen within services provision, for instance, so health, childcare, economy, labor rights, legal recognition of informal domestic work, and so on, citizenship, like property rights, governance, so we talk about inclusive urban planning, including women within designing, defining priorities for cities, and environment, so for instance, gender-sensitive disaster management, because women, again, are the most affected by environmental disaster. So this is a framework that we developed to help also cities, authorities, but also donors to understand that gender is not just a sector or one element, but we need to look at it from a broader perspective. So if cities are key, Carolina, what do you think that are the guiding principles for building cities for women?
Okay, so first of all, thank you, Julia, for the introduction and also for inviting us to be here, because it's also an opportunity for us of reflection and of thinking about what are we doing. So maybe thank you for the introduction also, because you sum up very well all the key issues with regard to cities and women. Before stepping into the next question, I would like maybe to make two additional things.
Yes.
In my opinion, there are two key issues that we should consider. First of all, women and men. The basic thing is that they use urban space in very different ways. Mm-hmm. This is due to many reasons, but mainly to their traditionalized gender division of roles in society. On this, normally women caregiving is one of the key issues. So this is what brings us to all the discrimination that is on women. So while men have traditionally been in charge of productive work and normally paid, and normally in the public space, women have been assigned to care and to domestic activities in the private space without being paid normally. This brings all the things that you mentioned before, like lower rates of decision making, less access to resources, overrepresented in the informal urban economy, more difficulties in accessing to housing property, etc., etc., etc. The second thing is that we need to recall that cities in which we live had a great expansion during the 19th and 20th century. And this is when modern and zonified urban space was developed mainly in all cities around the world. This was with the goal of increasing productivity and efficiency, but currently roles have changed. Women are also working, and women need a mixed and accessible urban space in order to get the basic services when moving with maybe with wheelchairs or with other like with the role of a caregiver. Considering this, and if we think that women represent around 49.5% of the urban population, of the population worldwide, and also considering that the increased rate of global urban population in the next decades, we can ensure that improving life conditions of women in cities can bring a major global impact. And this is something that we should have very clear.
Yeah. So yes, the accessibility and also understanding the new role of women in the society, which is changing, and also the relation with men and with also the cities, which are being planned by men and designed by men. I think is very important.
So maybe to go on with this and considering this, and all the invisible barriers that they also have, like less access to banking, transport service, labor rights, legal recognition of the informal domestic work, etc. They also influence the physical structure of the city in many ways. In response, the vision of a gender-responsive city will be different depending on the context. However, there are some high-level principles that normally guide the decision makers when they want to deal with urban and cities, and they can be structured maybe in two very big blocks. The first one is a proper design and management of the urban space and the housing infrastructure. And the second is the woman presence in decision making and top urban jobs, because those are the two main issues. These guiding principles are normally very well known by everyone, but we can sum up saying integration of land and public transport to deliver a mix of activities and services. We should also recall that this is the model of the Mediterranean city, so we are not inventing anything new. With regard to security, it would be good also to have to avoid women normally tend to avoid the dark urban areas in the city. So strict lighting and overall visibility in public space is also recommendable for a urban planner. And also, it's many studies say that providing activity in ground floors, it also helps to make women feel safer in the city. Another general principle is providing access to public, free, and accessible resting spaces in the city, with seats, shadows, free drinking water, etc. Because of her role of caregiver that constrains them or us to push baby carriage, wheelchairs, and also to move slower in the urban environment. Another important issue is the public and tailored transport service, like different different working schedules, and also tailored bus stops at night. That it is also coming from a lot of experience around the world. Getting into the private space, also the housing design and housing diversity can also support the visibilization of the women's roles inside the domestic space, like for instance putting the kitchen in a central space in the houses could also help to engage the rest of the family with the daily actions. And last but not least, as said before, increasing women in decision-making spheres is also crucial, because when women are engaged, like for instance, many mayors around the world, like the mayor of Banjul that we invited recently for a conference, they do things in a different way, and this is also something that should be increased.
I think it's interesting when you mention also the fact that you need to have eyes on the street, like Jane Jacobs, so to have this kind of connection between the ground floor and the street.
Yes.
And also you mentioned the Mediterranean cities. What can you explain more what the Mediterranean city add in terms of gender responsive?
At the end, when we speak about gender responsive, it's inclusiveness in the city. So it's not just for women, it's also for all people living in the city. So what happened in the Mediterranean and semi-Mediterranean cities is that transport, of course, was not so developed. So everybody had to arrive by walk to everywhere in the city. So speaking about Mediterranean is because the first civilizations in Europe were there, but it's because it's one of the ancient models in for us, and one of the main principles is mixticity of public-private and all functions of the city in small spaces.
What was also
high densities, etc.
Compact,
exactly,
and,
compactness,
and was not also economically polarized, no? So
yes,
everything was
exactly.
mixed. You
exactly.
have poor or wealthy people living at the same time. I think it's quite interesting. I didn't connect these two elements, and also I think the aspect of housing, how we design housing. I think also the typical social housing plan are designed by big family for big family, and now we have different type of family and also single mother. So how to design also kind of more flexible space within housing, I think is an important element. I think I can also connect with what you are saying by showing quickly a couple of projects that I think are quite relevant. The first one is Safety Pin, which was a project that Cities Alliance has supported in the past. And it's basically an app in India that was developed in India to help women to stay safe by letting users rate basically streets and area for safety criteria. So for instance, as you mentioned, visibility, lighting, density of people, gender diversity, security and transportation. So really like some indicators that are really true also for the Mediterranean, traditional Mediterranean cities. So aggregate basically data coming from users with some data coming from planning departments, and they basically show to the users and women what are the areas that are safer than the others. So for instance, in Delhi, they have identified 8,000 dark spots where lighting score was very low, was 0. And based on this information, the municipality, they basically improved 90% of the lighting deficit. So it was used also kind of policy making tool to improve the quality of spaces for women. And then another example, we were talking about transportation, and this is Medellin is a very famous picture of a very well-known project of the cable car, but I think it's quite relevant speaking about gender equitable mobility. Our president of Cities Alliance is Anibal Gavria and was the former mayor of Medellin, and he recently even told about this project in La Tribune, in a French newspaper. And this project was called the Metro, an integrated metro bus, metro cable, and escalators to connect disadvantaged residents, marginalized residents, to have access to jobs, amenities, and opportunities which were more in the center of the cities. And of course, the majority of these poor residents were women. They had to stay within the neighborhood because they couldn't move. So the first thing about mobility is the accessibility and the possibility to move around the city and to have access to facilities. And so this project also reduced also commuting time and cost. And similar projects can be found in other cities, also in Mexico, for instance, where they basically have dedicated one bus line only for women, so they could feel also safer in public transport, because many of this harassment and violence are also happening in public transport. So I think these kind of examples, we collected some of them in our also brochure. They can also inspire changes, broader transformation. So you can really change one element like mobility. You can to really transform many other aspects of the society. So, for instance, Medellin, through transformation, they were able to change the social dimension, the planning aspect, the inclusion, and public spaces. I'm curious, of course, about what also the European Commission and DEVCO is doing on gender and also in operation, how you mainstream gender in operation. Can you tell us a bit more about what you are planning or you have done on this topic?
Okay. Yeah. Many thanks for the participation on the webinar, because it's a great opportunity to see how we can also make Alliance also on synergies on the work that you are doing really practical, and also how we are trying also to do a practical job on how to pass the message to the colleagues that they are working in difficult areas, that they are not so gender sensitive, like transport, urban development, and all this, to see what are the win-win situations of having gender and the gender lens from the very beginning when they are starting doing the identification and formulation of the programs. So just to start, and then this is really covering all the things that you were already mentioning in this good present picture of what is happening in the cities for women. That the Gender Action Plan, the second one, that is from 2016 until next year, 2020, and now we are working in the next Gender Action Plan, but the current one is covering 3 thematic areas that is really related to also the holistic approach that you were saying that the cities has to offer to women. So we are dealing with everything that is related to the physical and psychological integrity of women. So everything that is related to gender-based violence, and also the access to sexual and reproductive health and services. Then the second pillar is everything that is related to women's economic empowerment. So as you were mentioning, both that now cities are more and more feminized. So women are moving from rural areas to urban areas. Most of them, they are located in the slums, and they are really covering more the informal work. So how we are gonna try to use also the space of the cities to really to provide them to this economic empowerment, and we have to be sure that we are providing them the transport services, the access to education, everything, that all the childcare facilities, so they can really have access to this economic project that we are promoting in the urban spaces. And then the third priority of the third thematic area is to give voice to women. And then you were both already saying that it's key to provide the space of consultation, that people, that women, they have access, that we are organizing all this consultation process when women are available for that, and that we are organizing probably some specific trainings or some specific spaces just for women if they are not feeling quite so easygoing to talk with men, but then mix or sing or separate spaces for consultation. So this is the third priority, to really put women in the decision-making process at all levels. So when we are talking about the role of local governments, how they are planning, so that the women, they are involved there. And also the organizations that they are represented, also women's interests and rights. So give voice to them. Then one thing that we are really pushing for gender mainstreaming is also that it's more like formal, but it is still a carrot for the colleagues, is that we have a target of 85% by 2020, that all our programs should be either gender mainstream or targeting really women's empowerment. So this is something that we are, to be honest, we are not going to reach it by the next year. So it will be also the next.
And all programs,
all new programs.
Yeah,
all the
delegation. And
all the programs that they are run in the delegation, but also here in headquarters. So we are also passing the message to the implementing partners that everything has to be mainstream. So now we are around 69%. So still we have quite a long way to run on this, but we are improving on that. And then how to ensure that this 85% at least is gender mainstream. We are really doing a lot of, I will say that we are trying to do a lot of practical efforts inside the house to change also the way that our colleagues, they are working. So this is the horizontal priority of the Gender Action Plan, that is called the institutional culture shift. That it's really how we change our day-to-day work. So how to how to incorporate the gender lens and the gender key questions that all our colleagues have to take in mind when they work and when they are designing our programs. So we have been revising that is really practical, like we have been revising the instructions of how to develop an action document, how to formulate an action document, not only from gender, but also for the right-based approach, because we have been also referring that the cities has to be gender responsive, but also inclusive. In some of the examples that we were saying, that also women in cities, they are also encompassing different discriminations. So probably we are facing a woman that has some kind of disability or some language barriers. So all this discrimination has to be also, all this lens has to be also when we are planning our program, for example, in urban development. And then another roadmap that I will say that we are really following practically is to follow the OECD gender marker. So this is really how we are screening our programs. And then I will say there are like 5 minimum criteria that we are following. And the first step that is to do a good gender analysis. And then to take into account the findings of this gender analysis in the design of our program. So for example, everything that you were saying at the very beginning, and Carolina was also highlighting all this data on where are the main barriers, what are the figures that they are talking about the reality of women. This has to be done, and it's not always done.
No.
So this is something that is like the first mandatory step that all our colleagues and also our implementing partners has to follow on that. We also really push for having in these gender mainstreaming programs to have at least one specific objective of the program that is gender sensitive, and at least also to have results and indicate and activities that they are targeting women. So when it comes, for example, to cities, that we are promoting gender responsive budgeting, when we are planning, that we are doing trainings specific for women, but also trainings to raise awareness of the staff of the local governments of the different departments on how to put the gender lens in. And then to put budget also behind these activities, because it's nice in the paper, but then it has to be implemented. And then the other thing that you were saying also to visualize in the programs also, in order to track the impact of the programs on women's lives, to have sex disaggregated data, age, and sometimes, if possible, also from disability side, but at least age and sex disaggregated data in our program, so we can track afterwards how it's going the implementation and also the whole monitoring and evaluation process. And then also it's very key, we are also trying to convince our colleagues that the key role of having gender specific indicators, not only number of women that have been attending, but quality, how we are going to change a little bit
increase the engagement.
And this is the thing that we are more struggling when we are talking also about the local governments, because normally people, the colleagues from the governments in the different countries, they say, but we don't have the money, or we don't have the capacities to collect this data, but we have to keep on pushing demand, asking this. But also, as you were saying, it's key to really measure how we are changing the gender roles and change the minds, and how we are changing also, and how we can measure how attitudes and the social norms they are changing. So we need to include all these qualitative indicators that they are measuring these changes on how to really progress on gender equality.
Happening, so your colleagues, for example,
it is happening quite slowly, I will say, to be honest. Sex disaggregated data is more in the programs, but when we are also is something that in the programs we have to be aware that if we are asking a local authority to collect data and they don't have it, we have to include an activity in our programs to reinforce the capacities of the local activity
program by doing this and also explaining how, because sometimes also the local authority doesn't even know. So
I will say that it's the same thing with the gender responsive budgeting at local level. Sometimes they say we are not ready for that, but probably we are ready to start the dialogue on how to do it. There is
we are now launching a program in Tunisia on gender responsive budgeting. And this is the same. So you start first with the training to understand what are also the gaps and the issues and build up.
So for us, it's the only way to really then plan in a gender responsive way. Because if you don't know this whole picture that you were showing at the very beginning, then the programs they are gonna be gender blind for sure. So we are trying to check with the colleagues how they are taking on board this.
And also maybe to complement all the mainstream gender mainstream actions that you are promoting, we should remind also that the staff working document of the Commission on Cities and Local Authorities recognize the need to support women as actors of change and to address the urban challenges with gender perspectives. So it basically reaffirms the need to create enabling environments for women. And so we are addressing it like from different perspectives that, of course, as Beatriz was saying, local authorities have the final word on that.
Of course, but also the former commissioner, Evan Mimica, he was really strong on gender equality. It was one of the main priorities.
Yeah, it was like the flagship
So I think it's great that you are really developing all this like a program, integrated program on this, and I hope that also now it will stay, but I suppose yes, also having a woman as a commissioner.
No, we are very happy because now it seems that for the next commissioner, I mean the new commissioner, she already raised the gender equality is gonna be one also the priority, so it's very good to know.
Just like a follow-up question, you mentioned that your target was 85% of programs with gender mainstreaming, and now you were saying that probably you reached 69%. When you're saying that, what kind of activities are you doing to mainstream gender in your programs?
Okay, so we are, as I was saying, we are revising all the procedures internally, like the instructions on how to formulate the action documents, in the blending, how we ensure that the gender lens are in the blending proposal. So we are revising templates, guidelines, trying to put, like not developing new guidelines, because I think everyone has already flooded, but guidelines. But to revise the existing one, trying to mainstream them. To avoid to have also annex on gender, annex on right-based approach, but really to include the specific key questions that the people have to keep in mind when they are developing that. So, and we are also developing thematic notes, really practical in non-traditional sectors like transport, energy, infrastructure. So 2 pages note for the colleagues with the data on why you have to take it on board. So we convince the colleagues that they have to take the gender dimension there and how to do it.
And do you have an example, because you mentioned like the priority on the physical part, the voice of women, and then also the aspect of urbanization. Do you have an example of a program that you are doing on the urbanization one, for instance?
Yeah, for example, and Carolina has also some examples to share, but for example, we have been supporting one program in Somalia that is called Inclusivity. So it's really including the specific objectives of the program to improve decent work and business activity with a particular focus on women and people living in vulnerable situations. So it has this component on there. And then the whole context analysis and the different results, there were issues related that we already raised on how to ensure that the streets, they are well lighted, or I don't know how to say, that they provide on that. And also how to include women in the decision making of the whole urban planning of the city. So this is one example that we are really trying to push gender specifically with activities and results.
And this program in Somalia is done by the Commission?
It's done by the Commission, yeah.
And Carolina, she was mentioning that there is the role of cities and local authorities. And what is your take on this? Because you are working, of course, in the unit dealing with that.
Yeah, well, cities at the core of all the actions for many reasons. Some of them were already mentioned by you, like the urban population growth. Cities also as economy of scale. Whatever we do in cities, it will have a great impact because of the urban population. Also cities, because they are and are becoming more and more strong political actors. We are seeing it in Europe and in many other places. So more and more cities are independent actors. And also because at least in the European Union policy and administration in the member states, they have direct and indirect influence in many of the local authorities' fields of activity. To give a figure, about around 75% of the regulations and directives have to be observed and implemented at regional or local level. And this is also happening in our partner countries, in which all the new priorities of the Commission, like the Green Deal, migration, digitalization, etc., they will have to be implemented in cities because it's where
SDGs as well, no? The
yes,
localization of
exactly.
SDGs,
Exactly. So I think this is a reality. It's not so it's not a priority. It's a reality. We need to work.
But how the European Commission can really engage with local authorities? What are the mechanisms?
Yeah, we have a really wide architecture of mechanisms to support cities. Many different ones. So from grants like multi-country facilities that we work sectorially with cities, like sustainable urban transport or in slum upgrading. We're working also many ways in energy and environment and cities. So we have all these programs that act globally, but providing normally grants to maybe to look for further investment from development banks or
leverage,
or financial institutions. But we are also supporting cities, for instance, for providing service and infrastructure through blending operations. So giving support to banks to provide a loan to a specific city, maybe through the government, or if it can be done directly with the city, to arrive until they guarantees the new instruments of the Commission, and so from grants to guarantees, there's a wide range of actions, and cities can engage from all of them, from all the different ways. One of the instruments that we launched recently, last year, was the first call for proposal, and now beginning of next year will be the second one, is the decentralized cooperation call for proposal for local authorities. This is also another way of engaging directly with cities. And here, inclusiveness is one of the key criteria to select project proposals.
There were proposals for twinning, or so cities were applying directly for this call?
Yeah, exactly.
And do you have an example of an exchange and program?
Yeah, well,
the kind of inclusive,
they have been recently selected, so programs have not started yet, but in their intentions, many of them are dealing with gender, with gender in different ways. For instance, the proposal of Madrid twinning with Praia has as one of the main goals is promoting access to water and sanitation, and they're going to measure also the impact in the gender gap, because as discussed before, access to services is one of the barriers for women, and they spend much more time and they walk much more distances to access to services. So this is one example, but there are many others.
Okay. And Beatriz, do you have? Are you collaborating with the unit of cities on this, or?
Yeah, we are trying to develop also this, as I was saying, the thematic notes on cities and urban development from gender and right-based approach. So the idea is to do. We are more and more on the way of doing practical tools for the colleagues, really, like going to the point. And so we are checking with the colleagues from the different units, like from Carolina, to see how practical and how useful are the tools that we are doing on mainstreaming. So it's really helping our colleagues to take this on board.
Yeah,
the political commitment is there, but then there is still the gap in the technical way of how we are.
And what are normally the challenge, the obstacle in doing that? What do you think?
I will really say that the colleagues, they are on board for that. So you cannot find many colleagues that they say that they don't care about gender. They they believe or they know that also is mandatory, and if there is a political commitment on this. But then the colleagues, they tell you really honestly, tell me how to do it quick and easy. Because when colleagues, they face that when they have to start planning and formulate the program, they have like 10 different guidelines of 50, 100 pages on environmental, all the cross-cutting issues. So people, they don't really have time to do it,
No, because it's considered as a kind of an addition, no? It's
yeah,
not
yeah.
in the daily work.
Yeah,
and
it's
the
not
way
in the
they
general.
do planning.
Yeah. So we are really pushing. We are not still there, but we are pushing also that we want that all the terms of reference of the job description, they include gender mainstreaming as something that is part of your job description. Even if you are working in transport, you are developing more energy. Then we are also developing online courses, but so far they are not mandatory, but we want also that in the welcome package in the institution is not only the administrative kind of training that you have to follow, but the gender is part of, like also the right-based approach. So we are trying to push on that also. Then also to work with the colleagues from the evaluation unit, and they have been producing also a note on how to ensure that gender and right-based approach is in the evaluations, and when the colleagues, they are developing the TORs for the evaluation teams.
So the internal procedures,
so
they're trying to streamline
all the internal procedures, they have the gender lens. So it's something that is really related to this institutional culture shift.
And you can also collect data from also programs that like are run by delegations on the gender, so to kind of measure how.
So every year we are producing the Gender Action Plan report. So not only because the Gender Action Plan is mandatory not only for the EU institutions like DEFCO, ECHO, DGNIR, but also for member states, because it was adopted in the Council conclusions, so it's also mandatory for them. So it's good because in a way we are passing the message from the EU side, but also member states, they are passing the message also to the implementing partners in the country.
And what are the member states that are more committed in terms of gender?
Well, if we talk about just figures, on these 85%, they are not within, they are around 50, 51, so they are improving on this, but slowly. I would say they are pushing, but they are serving the same challenge that we are serving here in the institution, because and we all know, I think, the role of the gender focal points in the different institutions is something that is you are not only the gender experts in the delegations, but
you are doing
with another files that you have to follow. So the knowledge of the management also of that is, and we are saying that this is not something that is related to the role of the gender focal point. It's something that it's for everyone. So the gender focal point has to be supporting the other colleagues on how to mainstream, but it's for the colleagues to do the mainstreaming from the very beginning. So it's something that we say that the Gender Action Plan, as I was saying, is covering everything. So if you see the objectives, it's dealing with agriculture, it's dealing with cities, it's dealing with transport, with energy. So it's for all the colleagues to contribute to the Gender Action Plan.
And do you have trainings?
We have trainings, and we are developing trainings in the delegation and also here in headquarters, because now we are working together with the right-based approach, and so we are developing trainings on right-based approach integrating gender mainstreaming. We are gonna launch during the first quarter, I guess, hopefully, an online training on this. We have already one online training in DEFCO Academy on gender. We have thematic notes on gender, but also we are now developing this more shorter thematic notes on right-based approach and gender in different topics. And one is in urban development. They are a little bit.
And what are the delegations that are working more on urban development and gender? Do you have in mind what are the countries that are working more on this?
We have, instead of speaking of delegation, maybe, well, we can give examples of some of the global programs we have. For instance, one of the programs we manage with urban planning gender sensitive approaches, PSUP program, that is a participatory Islam upgrading program, which empowers also women and girls through community managed funding. PSUP is an initiative of the ACP group of states, so it's implemented there. And it's operational in 35 countries, so it's not just it's a global initiative. The program puts women at the center in 3 different strategic ways. First, at policy level. Secondly, driving a gender-sensitive methodology for SLAM upgrading, so integrating also women in all the decision-making, and also requiring delivery of practical improvements that benefit women in first level. So PSUP is basically woman-driven, woman-led, and also woman-targeted. We say it like these three aspects. As said, this is operating in many countries, but we have very good examples on Kenya, for instance.
And in Kenya, why it's good? What they have done?
This, as said, it has many different aspects, but we can speak about more women as results, more women represented in decision-making processes. It has been done by allocating representative slots in community development committees. Currently, 45% of all the representation slots are held by women, so this is a good figure. There's also the time spent by women on collecting water from central stamp pipes has been reduced from 30 to 10.
Talking about that.
Exactly, to 10 minutes. There are a lot of security on tenure, and for women-headed households, it has been increased through participatory land regulation programs. A lot of inclusivity in program decisions. There's also a specific program on entrepreneurship and skill training for young mothers, and to provide them basic skills. So there are many aspects in this
project.
This project started in 2008, and we're in the third phase already. And now they're looking for the collaboration of the local governments as well, because they see it as an opportunity to do things right.
Okay. I think it's we are now in the Cities Alliance. We are in the phase of developing the program on gender and women inclusion for the next year. So we'd be happy to have an exchange with you, because also to learn from your experience. Of course, our focus is cities and urban inclusion, but of course also we are also trying to mainstream gender also in our operation in terms of grant management and procedures and project design as well. So we open also, of course, our members. We would be happy to have an exchange with interested members to develop together this program. We will focus for sure in Tunisia, where we have also a country program. So we try also to develop a kind of long-term engagement in countries, as you were saying, like be good to have different phases of the project to have good impacts. And in Tunisia, we are starting now a project on gender mainstreaming in municipal finance, and we'll do more on the CDS, city development strategy, so how to include the women in developing the city strategy, and also public spaces, so really to implement public spaces that are more inclusive and safe. We have about 10 minutes for Q&A. I got already a question from a person that is basically asking, yes, that there are a lot of initiatives where women are engaged and empowered. So all these projects are normally led by women, but this person is asking if there are also initiatives and possibility to incorporate men in the process towards building more inclusive cities. And what do you think about it?
Well, this is one of the challenges and the key questions that we have to address. For example, in the Gender Action Plan, one of the objectives that we are promoting not only urban programs, but in all of them is really to involve the men and boys. So when we are starting even with education programs, to really start changing also the bad masculinities. So changing the values and how they have been also been that on the gender roles. So we are more and more promoting also this component in the different programs on really involving men and boys in the discussions and doing, if necessary, also doing awareness raising campaigns on the different needs and rights of women, and also how to accompany also and support boys and men on changing their minds on this social and discriminatory social cultural norms. So definitely men and boys have to be allies on that. They are really agents of change like women. And when we are talking about gender equality, it's not a women issue, it's something, a win-win situation for women and men. So we have to take them on board.
And of course, women inclusion will have an impact in the whole society, you know. So, for example, economic empowerment, that big implication in terms of productivity, in terms of care and education. You know, if we talk about also democracy support, the role of women is key. So I think men are essential for this. But it's true that sometimes it says in the question why men are more or less excluded from the debate. And,
but I will say that
is it?
They traditionally they have been excluded, but women we have been also excluded from different areas. So on the whole participatory and decision making process. So when we are talking about giving voice, I will say that giving voice to women, because it's true that so far they haven't had the opportunity of reaching these spaces, but also to have give voice also to men that they are in favor of gender equality and women's rights. So also to, and then for the others that they are not in favor, to convince them that this win-win situation for both. So it's nothing that it's only for women to be in this.
Yeah, maybe we should also recall that we are not in the 60s anymore when first feminist strikes and struggles started. So we are in much more inclusive time, and this is something that became clear in the 80s, 90s. It started already to be clear. So of course, men are part of the discussion, and this discussion is taking place because men are in it. So we are half of the population, and women are the other half.
And I will say just briefly also that when we are talking about men, it is key to have involved also at the local level, the religious leaders. They are really power agents of change the completely message. So we are really trying to also the local and the chief of the communities and the religious leader on board, because they are amazing.
I was mentioning gender responsive budgeting, and of course men and men officials are key, to understand how to design a budget that is gender responsive. So it's also when you design a urban strategy, it's very important to have the whole spectrum of the professionals involved. Are there any questions from the audience? Yes, if you want to intervene with a question, we have still a few minutes, like 5 minutes to get more questions. You didn't need to unmute. They are telling me that you need to unmute and then ask the question. Well, there are no questions apparently, but so we can wrap up. There is one question. Sorry.
What do you think are the biggest factors influencing the inclusivities of public spaces?
Please, Carolina.
The bigger factors, I think that we need to come back again to the things we said before. So I would say from the decision-making perspective, including women in the participatory processes and in the decision-making processes, in order to get their voices heard. And secondly, thinking of the public space as a space that should be lived by human beings. It seems something very obvious, but it is not, because traditionally it has been thought for transport and for functional aspects of the city, and not for the people really living there. So not just considering women, but considering everyone living in the city, like boys and girls and elderly people as well, which are totally excluded from the city design process. So I would say the two of them.
Yeah, just to add, I think, yeah, as you said, the human scale city needs to be, and in terms of public space, there are different indicators that we need to look when we talk about women inclusion, and it's the aspect of safety and the lights, of course, during the night, and the comfort, so the fact that the space is comfortable also for women, and they can have also kind of privacy in some, especially in some city, they need to have dedicated space. And then in terms of visibility, the possibility to see also the different access to the space, to have a clear picture of the space. I think it's important. So I would add this as and of course the social interaction and the fact there are more activities, especially dedicated to children, because most of the time women are also accompanying children. So to have also dedicated spaces for children is also allow women to interact among themselves.
And if I may, I will just add something that also to make the local governments accountable for that.
Yes.
So that the different, the civil society is really seeing this like a key issue, and they are really pushing and pressing the local governments to really plan gender responsive and provide services that they are targeting the women's needs. So I will say that this is key also.
And they need to understand the needs, the specific need of women, because sometimes we don't even see, we don't understand. So doing participatory process in order to really understand how a woman lives public spaces, so the awareness. So I thank you for this question, and I would like to thank again Carolina and Beatriz for being here, for also sharing the experience. From the European Commission, we are sitting here very close, but we don't have many possibility to interact. So I think it was a great opportunity, and we hope to have further conversation and collaboration. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.